Hello, folks. Welcome to our session for implementing Eureka Math TEKS Edition. Our focus for this session today is to focus on student work analysis and its impact. So this session specifically is for kindergarten through second grade. We're so glad you're here asynchronously. And so what you will need is a lot of materials that you will be analyzing and note catching throughout today's session. And so please make sure that in your handout, you will identify the copy of the session guided notes, the protocols and the tools. So the student work analysis protocol, a copy of the anchor lesson for today is grade 1, module 2, lesson 3. So I know this is blank, but this deck didn't let me edit. My name's Callie Gonzalez. This is my voice. You probably have seen me in your classroom a couple times. I work for the Achievement Network, and I'm just really excited to facilitate this to support your ability to analyze student work with Eureka. All right. Asynchronous, stay engaged, be curious, and pause. Pause this video as you start working and really try to lean into the work. Go ahead and take a second and read the session overview. All right. Before we dive into our session, we're going to set our purpose for learning. Go ahead and take a second and read the essential question and the aligned competency. Okay, we have 4 parts to our learning today, and we've already done our overview. So now we're going to start by exploring the student work analysis by reading it thoroughly and thinking about how each step will impact instruction and student learning. All right, so you're going to, in a second, pause this video, and we're going to take 5 minutes to really read through this student work analysis protocol. As you read, I want you to think about, like, how is this protocol similar to the ways that you're already analyzing student work? What are some supports for this work that you would like to receive from your coach? You know, it's one thing to internalize a lesson with your coach, but now it's another thing to analyze what was the impact from my instruction and what am I going to do? So take 5 minutes and analyze the protocol in your handout. It is linked there. All right. Now that you have oriented yourself over the student work protocol, analysis protocol, step 1, we're going to dive into this. So step 1, you are asked to review a task and determine what specifically is being asked of students. Now, doing this will help better understand how students' pre-existing strengths will be essential. You will also be able to anticipate what are some potential misconceptions. So I would like you to open up the grade 1 module 2 lesson 3 in your handout, and you're going to read the task. And as you read, consider the following questions. What are students being asked to do and understand in this task? What knowledge, skills, and vocabulary do students need to access this task? What TEKS are being assessed through this task? What will be challenging about this task? I would push you to actually do the student work, if you haven't already, to deeply understand the student experience. So take 8 minutes and deepen your understanding of this task. And pause the video. All right. So let's dive into step 2. Determine the success criteria for the task. Now, this is when we will determine with your grade level team, in your PLCs, or on your own, you're going to be determining based on this task, what is the criteria for fully meeting expectations? But then what does it mean to be in the partial? What's the criteria there? And then what does it mean for not yet meeting? Think of it as a rubric. It's to norm around expectations for your analysis. Now, this seems very granular, but it's actually really important. Strong criteria, success criteria, are observable in student responses. They list the qualities that must be present in the student response. They use student-friendly language, and they align to the objective as an exemplar response. So in creating these success criteria, you'll have a clear picture of what it means for a student to be fully, partially, or not yet. Now, remember, ensuring that it is aligned to the objective. This is not the time where we will get nitpicky about a student's punctuation when it has nothing to do with the objective. So really ensure that you stay really focused on from step 1, what does that mean for meets? So you're actually now going to practice creating a list of success criteria and reflecting on what that looks like for students to be fully, partially, or not yet. So in your handout, again, you're going to review your reflections from step 1 and identify, what does it mean for fully? What does it mean for partially? And what does it mean for not yet? Strive to have 3 to 4 success criteria for this task. And again, when we think about students in not yet, it's very easy to have a negative mindset. But I'm going to push us all that these are kids. And it's our job to see the growth and the support that they need. So when we think and articulate about not yet, we come with a positive mindset about it. All right, so go ahead and take 3 minutes to create this criteria of success. In a moment, you actually are going to compare your list to a list that's already that's going to be modeled for you. Go ahead and pause this video and start creating your list of those 3 components. All right. So now that you've had the opportunity to write your own success criteria for grade 1, module 2, lesson 3's problem set, you're going to watch this video and you're going to see a coach share their thinking on completing step 2. And as you watch, you're going to compare their criteria to your own and go ahead and adjust accordingly.
Let's talk about step 2 of the student work analysis protocol, which is determine the success criteria. We're specifically looking at the problem set from grade 1, module 2, lesson 3. I'm going to share my thinking as I did this task and the success criteria I determined. Here's the task we reviewed in step 1 with an excerpt of the exemplar. I created an exemplar for all 4 problems, but to narrow our focus for this video, I'm going to look at problem number 4 only. Although we are only focusing on number 4, students are expected to do the same thing across all 4 problems. In order to determine my success criteria, I have to ask myself 2 questions. What are students being asked to do? And then what do students need to understand about this work to be successful? The first thing I noticed is that the students need to be able to draw a picture that matches the word problem correctly and count on from 9 and stop at 10 using that picture. Then they need to be able to put that idea from that picture into an equation. After that, students need to be able to count on from 10 to identify the total using the same picture, and then again communicate that same idea from the picture in an equation. Finally, students complete the statement with the total that they found. Now, I've identified everything students have to do in the assignment. So now I need to move on to thinking deeply about what students have to understand in order to do those things. In this example, students really need to understand part-whole relationships, and how to make a 10 is about making an easier problem. If students understand that they are looking at the add-ins in the problem and trying to make a 10 in order to make it an easier problem, they can draw the picture to communicate the part-whole relationships, and then communicate the exact same idea in the equation and then the total in the statement. Now that I've identified the skills that are being asked of my students in this task, it's time to turn those skills into actionable success criteria. Before I write them, I want to remind myself of the success criteria for strong success criteria. Success criteria are observable or visible in students' response. List the qualities that must be present in the student work, use student-friendly language, and align to the objective and exemplar response. Since the task is asking them to count on from 9 to make a 10 to faster solve an addition sentence, I want to make sure that is clear in my success criteria. Ideally, this is something I can put in front of students, so I want to break it down as simply as possible. I start by first listing that in order to be successful on this task. Student work shows that pictures are drawn correctly to match the word problem like in number 4. The grouping of 10 is done correctly. Again, this is when prompted like in number 4. I'm looking to see if the addition sentences are written correctly. I'm also seeing if the statement is filled out correctly with the total. Before I can sign off, I want to again go back to my list of what makes strong success criteria and compare my list to those qualifications. Everything here can be observed in a student's response. These are all the things that need to be present in their response. The language is student-friendly, and it is very much aligned to the objective and the exemplar response that I have already reviewed. Finally, before I start looking at student work, I want to make sure that I know exactly what I mean when I say fully, partially, or not yet meeting expectations. When it comes to fully meeting expectations, we want to be sure that students are including all 4 of our success criteria and fulfilling them accurately. In the case of this task, that means that for number 4, they have the picture of circles drawn correctly to match the word problem, the grouping of 10 is done correctly, and the addition sentences are filled out correctly, reflecting 9 plus 1 equals 10 and 10 plus 6 equals 16. Finally, they must have the statement filled out correctly with a total of 16. For partially meeting expectations, we're looking for students who may have included all the success criteria, but some are inaccurate. For example, they may be able to do 3 out of the 4 tasks in number 4 with accuracy, and may struggle with the addition sentences of making a 10, but their total answer is correct. A student may also be considered partially meeting expectations if they are missing no more than half of the success criteria. In this case, if they have 2 success criteria accurately fulfilled, we would consider that partially meeting expectations. Finally, when we are sorting students into the category of not yet meeting expectations, that means we are seeing that their work may attempt to include all of the success criteria, but only 1 or none are accurate, or they are missing more than half of the success criteria. For example, a student who struggles to draw a picture of the circles to match the word problem, or struggles with the grouping of 10, will not be able to correctly fill out the number sentence and statement.
All right. So once the success criteria has been determined for fully, partially, and not yet, the next step is to sort the student work into 3 categories. So you're going to practice right now. In your handout, there is a link to the samples from grade 1, module 2, lesson 3 problem set. And so right now, go ahead and take 5 minutes and sort based on the success criteria that has just been laid out. All right, if you haven't already sorted, please pause this video. If you have, we're going to go ahead and share what was sorted and the rationale. Oh, so here we are. As you can see on the bottom in the gray boxes, we have student D, fully met, student A and B partially met, and not yet meeting student expectations was student C, E, and F. So student D was fully meeting expectations. And you can see that their picture is drawn correctly to match the word problem. And the grouping of 10 was done by adding 1 to 9. If we take a look at the statement, we can see that the student was able to fill it out using the correct numbers. Now, student A and B were partially meeting expectations. The students were able to get the correct answer and draw the picture correctly. They also grouped the drawings into 10, but did it by grouping 7 and 3 circles. So if we look back at the lesson objective, we can see that it states that students are to make a 10. One of the add-ins is 9. By adding 3 to 7, the students also did not fill out the first part of the statement correctly. Instead of being 9 plus 1, it became 9 plus 3. Student C did not meet expectations due to the leaving the number 4 blank. Remember, even though we have an exemplar for all parts of the problem set, we are focused on number 4 for the analysis. Student E also did not meet expectations. The first thing I noticed was that the picture was drawn correctly with 9 and 7 circles. I then see that the student attempted to group the circles into 10 by adding 1, but was not successful due to grouping 7 and 1. And so this was transferred into the statement, which caused the student not to get the correct answer. And so finally, student F did not meet expectations. And we can see here, and yet, right, we can see that the student was able to draw the correct number of circles. The student then circles one circle in an attempt to follow the steps to solve the problem. And the rest of the problem makes me think that the student memorizes steps to solve rather than really understanding the purpose of the drawing and how to make 10. All right, so using the established criteria, we're actually going to skip this slide. And we're going to move on to steps 4 and 5. All right, so you have analyzed the task. You've identified what are the criteria for success for meets, partially, and not yet. You've sorted the student work. And so now we're going to create this step, right? What we're going to do is watching this video, you're going to how this coach has practiced identifying trends using the asset-based mindset. And as you watch, I want you to reflect on the following questions in your guided notes. What is the impact of student learning when using an asset-based mindset for step 4?
Step 4, discussion and analysis, is a direct branch off of the work done in step 3. In this video, you will see how I maintain an asset-based mindset by continuing the line of questioning begun in step 3. What can students do? What can students not yet do? One thing to note, though it will not be present in this video, in your collaborative meetings, you will continue the discussion and analysis, naming strengths and areas of growth to extend to the larger picture of the classroom. Once trends have been identified, you will consider what teacher actions and classroom conditions may have led to specific trends. This will create additional avenues for the types of data-based, grade-level appropriate adjustments that we will discuss in step 5. Remember that our bilingual and dual language student work needs to be analyzed through a holistic approach, considering their strengths in both languages. What can students do in one language to help support what they can't do yet in the partner language? Alright, let's begin our initial analysis. We are going to start by looking at this sample that is fully meeting expectations. It may seem obvious to determine their strengths and counterintuitive to look for areas of growth, but we want to make sure that we are specific about what is going well so that we can build on those strengths. And even students who are fully meeting expectations still have plenty of room to grow, and we want to make sure that we are pushing them to honor their skills. Additionally, with all these samples, we want to be sure that we are using an asset-based mindset. In other words, we want to start by looking at what our students can do before we identify what they cannot yet do. This student met all 4 success criteria. So starting with that they can do, I can easily name that they know how to group a 10 when the add-in is 9. Everything on their problem set is correct. But there is one area in which they can improve to be even better. It is to label their drawing to reflect the children sitting and the children standing. Now we will move on to the partially meeting sample. Again, I'm using an asset-based mindset, so I begin by asking, what can this student do? This student has drawn a picture to reflect the numbers in the word problem and solved for the correct answer. They are also developing an understanding to group 10. In this instance, they were supposed to only circle one more to make a 10. Since the student circled 3, they transferred the 3 to the number sentence, which made it incorrect. This student was following the steps but did not pay close attention to the 9 plus blank equals 10. Overall, this student cannot yet demonstrate mastery in identifying the missing part of an addition sentence when the add-in is 9. Lastly, we come to the sample that is not yet meeting expectations. Before we dive in, I just want to name that sometimes with samples like these, it can be challenging to maintain an asset-based mindset. It can sometimes feel like there is very little these students can do, but it is important to remember that students learn when they can. In other words, when they have the resources and supports that allows them access to the HQIM. They are still in your class working hard and trying their best even when it may not seem that way. And it is up to us as educators to ensure that we are providing the support that will allow them to better access grade level tasks. It is almost more important with this group than others to maintain that asset-based mindset because these are the students that will require the most support and encouragement and will also likely need the most uplifting. That encouragement and support is more effective when it's grounded in their work rather than generally saying, work harder or keep trying. With that in mind, let's look at these samples. When I ask myself what this student can do, I see right away that the student was able to draw a picture that represents the numbers in the word problem, being 7 and 9. The student is also able to identify that 9 plus 1 equals 10. They cannot yet complete the grouping of a 10 with the pictures that they drew, which translate to the addition sentence of 10 plus 1 equals 9. The student is remembering the steps they have to complete, but not yet understanding why.
All right. So, in this final step, you're going to use the data that they have gathered and trends you've observed to create an action plan that targets specific adjustments to upcoming instruction. So, as you watch, I want you to reflect on the following questions in your guided notes. How can you use the module and lesson internalization protocol to create strong action steps?
Finally, we come to step 5. Here, we will be taking all the work and analysis that we have done on the problem set and use it to create an action plan for our students that is data-driven, grade level appropriate, and moves our students forward without remediation. We'll start by looking at what makes an action step effective and what makes for a less effective action step. Effective action steps are based on the trends and data found during student work analysis, use only the existing HQIM, are grade level appropriate, do not include whole class reteaches, are aimed at the specific needs of a variety of students, are supported by module and lesson internalization. Less effective action steps are not based in data, make use of outside materials or resources, remediate skills from previous grades, attempt to be one size fits all, do not utilize the module or lesson internalization protocols. Now we will use the trends we identified in the previous video to determine the action step that we will take. Pause this video and take a moment to reread the trends to yourself. Across the board, I can see a trend in the strengths of students being able to draw a picture correctly to represent the word problem. When I look at the growth areas, I can see some which include labeling of drawings. This is not the most effective place to focus because based on my internalization of the module and lesson, I know this is not the core understanding or purpose of this lesson. This is really about counting on from 9 to make a 10 to faster solve an addition sentence. So my action step should be related to that purpose I found during my internalization. In 2 of my groups, an area of growth is the grouping of 10 when counting on from 9. I'm wondering, has this teacher's instruction focused on memorizing steps like remember to always add a 1? Has the teacher asked questions about how the pictures and equations show the same information? The root misunderstanding here is that students do not yet see the clear connection between the counting on of 9 to 10. Therefore, my action step is to get students talking about those connections in an upcoming lesson. Before we write out our full plan for adjusting our lesson to support the actions that we determined, we want to make sure that we are utilizing our internalization protocols, both module and lesson. Here, you'll see some questions to consider. Use your notes from module internalization to determine where in the module you will see this concept or skill again. You can use the lesson internalization protocol for that upcoming lesson to determine what adjustments you'll need to make within the lesson, especially around pacing. Do you need to add additional time to an activity for this action step? If so, where will you need to shorten in order to make the time? Then finally, how will you reassess this skill in order to see the impact of your action step? In Eureka Math Teaks Edition, skills progress over time, so it's very likely you will be able to gather data on student progress towards mastery within one or more of the lesson components of an upcoming lesson. So there's no need to create an additional retest for students. Now that we've used our internalization protocols to determine when we will implement this action step, it's time to write out a specific step-by-step plan for adjusting that lesson. I'm going to look 2 lessons ahead at Grade 1, Module 2, Lesson 5. I want to provide opportunities for students to talk about how it is most efficient to solve an addition sentence if we first count to 10. In this fluency, the students are practicing seeing the connection of the steps to first add 9 plus 1 to get to 10, and then add 10 plus blank to get the final answer. When administering this fluency practice, you can adjust it by including a quick discussion for students to discuss what they are noticing. For example, the teacher could have the students do a quick turn and talk after a few problems and ask students to think about the pattern that they are noticing. As the teacher listens in, they'll look for a student who is able to identify the pattern of counting to 10 by adding 1 and then some. The teacher will then praise the student for their reflection, then ask the student if adding 9 plus 1 plus 5 is easier than adding 10 plus 5. With that in mind, the student and teacher will continue with this fluency activity, and at the end, the teacher can take 10 seconds to clearly and concisely stamp the takeaway that it is faster to solve for an unknown by making a 10 first. My adjustment plan also addresses the concept development, which is the heart of the lesson. In this lesson, the objective is to make a 10 when the add-in is 9. This builds on Lesson 3, so it's a great opportunity to reinforce the connection between the efficiency of getting to 10 first to solve an addition sentence. Throughout the lesson, the teacher can ask students to talk about what strategy do they think will be the fastest or the most efficient during a turn and talk. Continue with the connections of part total and how they are transferred to the abstract representation. One option is to cold call after the turn and talk to hear responses whole group. Throughout, the teacher should be pushing students to use language like make it 10, part total, bond, and efficient.
All right.
Finally,
My
we come to step 5.
So, right now, I want you to think about the examples and non examples from Action Steps Part 2. Think about which one do you believe in these action steps are examples and which one do you think are non examples? As they click through, go ahead and skim through on which one is a strong action step and why. All right. So now we're going to get to close at the end with next steps. So your next steps right now is to click on the exit ticket. This is a quiz that will quiz you on kind of your knowledge from this session. When it asks what provider, make sure you find the drop down to Achievement Network. Put in your school, your specific name. If you're a teacher or a leader, make sure you identify that, and it will take you to the right quiz. It is super important that you get this exit ticket done to give yourself credit for this asynchronous work that you just accomplished. Great job. And if you have any questions, please don't forget, ask your leadership team or myself. I'm just excited to watch this in action.